And with this, the whole arc, I don't know if it's supposed to be the Narrow 66 or the Aoi Cosmos arc, but whatever this is officially going to be called, the end of this arc is obviously here. Now, I'm going to give my full honest take on this, and I know like there's some people that probably have seen my going about on Twitter. I'll give my context, and if you want to get mad at me in the comments, you can, but at least hear out what I have to say. So, this chapter, obviously, this was the outing point of this arc. It looks like the last real bit. We see Narrow. The last time we see Narrow, he's drained up, and we don't even know if he's conscious or he's gonna have a way to get out of this area. But Shura is done. I feel like it's obvious that Shura isn't coming back. Shura should be absolutely over. I wouldn't imagine that, unless he got wormholed out of the area, I don't really see how his character could exist. If Ziggy wants to take Shura and modify him into a cyborg or something later, I'm all for it. I'd like the dynamic between Shiki and Shura. I thought that was the best part of the entire arc, to be perfectly honest. Like, I liked the arc overall. Like, don't get me wrong, I liked this arc. I thought this was a good arc. I liked the story, obviously what was at stake. I like what it did for Shiki, and I actually liked a lot of the fights. My only real problem when it came to the fights was ending a lot of them with overdrive. I thought that if Mishima just kind of pulled back a little bit with the overdrive, I would have been fine with it. I've mentioned this before. Since this is like the end, I might as well I'll give like a little tiny tidbit in there of pretty much my take. I wish that Mishima only gave overdrive to Jin and Homura because they were the ones that were like, Jin was already close and Homura's very skilled and she's had her ether gear for years and stuff, whereas Sylph and Wise, I wish that in this arc they got the whole ether lines coming off the body, that state right before overdrive, just because it would have hyped up the other two overdrives, but it also would have been cool to see the progress for the other guys, because they just kind of skipped over that portion of it, and I wasn't a huge fan of that, because I liked that there were steps to getting to overdrive. I thought that was a pretty cool indication of like if a character is actually close to achieving this power level. I just thought it was neat. I thought it was a really cool kind of like visual way to say like, oh, this character might be able to achieve this soon. But it wasn't a big deal. Like the oceans were kind of, at least to me, kind of like the part of the arc. I like their designs. I thought they were kind of cool. It looks like Mishima is keeping them around, so they're not dying. Maybe they'll come back later. But at least as of right now, they weren't, like, they were pretty much treated for the most part as measuring stick characters, which pretty much just means that like their fights were mostly to just show off like the character's new stuff. I'd say Jin definitely got like a character stuff in this arc. Like his fight with Callum I actually liked, and it at least makes Callum memorable in the fact that where his fight was. I did like Lyra. I'm hoping Lyra sticks around. Maybe we see Lyra in some like tavern, like scamming people out of money with cards. Like we get to see her at some point later in the future. But after that point, like we do see stuff going on with like Shura and Izuna. That part of the chapter was a little strange. I understood what Mishima was going for, and I don't think there was really a problem with it. I think more of just like, damn, Izuna really went out like that. I mean, she doesn't really have anything left at this point, so I can kind of see from her standpoint why it wouldn't be as crazy as like just some character doing it. Let me pull up the chapter real quick, because I want to look at her exact dialogue to kind of really grasp what she's saying, because I think when you think about what she's saying, it makes more sense. I've seen more people talk about, like, this being an example of a toxic relationship, but I mean, I don't think Mishima was going for that. I don't think, this is one thing that I think is kind of funny. It's like, I've been talking a lot about, like, the stuff with Witch, but I don't think that people actually are giving Izuna's scene enough credit. I think this was actually pretty well done by Mishima, because there's a whole part where Shura, he's confronted by Izuna, and Izuna is talking to him, saying like how the planet's gonna blow up in a few minutes, and he's like, oh, so you came to kill me, okay, whatever. And he's mentioning that like he figured out about her ether gear a long time ago, and she's like interrupting him, saying like, sort of, but not really, because it never worked on him, because he never knew love, so the way that her ether gear works didn't function right on him. And we knew that he had shown signs of actually having some form of connection to Azuna from moments like when that one dude said that Azuna was like just like some consort of his and he killed her about it. He was very unhappy about it. And she's mentioning that he actually did develop a connection, like some form of feelings to her. And I think that is validated with events in the story. But from Izuna's standpoint, I think Izuna understands that it, like, Shura is a monster. Shura's a horrible person, but she understands why he's like that. She's looking at it, I think, more of, it's not like he was always like this. It was like the environment that he was in that made him like this. Because we shot Shura when he was a little kid. He used to be just like a normal person. He used to be a happy kid. And then at some point down the line, he became like this deranged dude who's just fine with killing people at the drop of a hat. And I think Izuna looks at him like that, knowing that if it wasn't for like how he grew up, how like where he was at with like Nero and stuff, that he probably wouldn't have become like this. But I think because of that, she's also saying that like through her, he was able to actually finally find somebody that loved him. Because again, what she's saying is he never knew love, so it never worked on him. But it's only through like the actual one that he developed with her, that she saw it. So I can understand what she's saying. Because from Izuna's perspective, she understands that he's like this, but she also understands what made him this way, and understands that, like, the connection that he had towards her was legitimate. He actually had a sense of care for her. But when she's mentioning that, he killed all of, like, the Empire, like, they killed her friends, her family, and everything. One thing about this is, I think it makes sense that she would go out with them at this point off of what she had just said before, because obviously if they killed like all these people, she doesn't really have anything left. This is to her like her way out. This is her end. A lot of her friends are gone. Her father's gone. Like this whole area in this cosmos is gone. The life as she knew it, even before she got taken by Shura, is gone, and obviously now it's still gone. So, like, for her, instead of, like, trying to restart her life, I think this was just the way that she wanted to end it. Again, I think this was actually a really complicated scenario with, like, understanding why Izuna did this. Again, it's funny, like, the witch stuff, I wasn't as keen on the witch stuff, but I actually thought how Izuna went about this was actually really well done. Because it shows you more of her insight onto things, and not just her looking at Shura from being a bad guy. Because again, when you're thinking about these characters, we're looking at them as the readers. Izuna is looking at it from like a character inside of this world. To her, like, she knows Shura and she knows aspects about Shura. So I can understand where again she's coming from, and to a degree. I mean, it's definitely like a complicated scenario. But then we have the whole 20,000 antimatter bombs go off, and Witch goes up to the top of the Eden Zero to pretty much give one big moment where she's going to defend the ship, sacrifice her life in order to withstand it. Now, before I even talk about my feelings on this, let me just get this straight. I absolutely, it's unfortunate that Witch died. It's sad for the characters, obviously. Like I said, when you're looking at scenarios like this, you also have to think about it from the perspective of the characters. That's one of the reasons I chose this picture of Shiki crying for the picture of this chapter. Because even though one of my complaints about Witch is, even though Witch showed up early in the series, she hasn't done a whole lot. She's by far, out of like the main cast on the Eden Zero, Mishima has given her the least amount of spotlight. And to me, I don't have the same, like, I'm not as connected to her. I was never been a huge fan of Witch. I liked her design. I think she's kind of entertaining, but I never had anything that really made me attached to the character. So I was kind of like, not like entirely, like I still liked her, but it's like she definitely would be like near the bottom, at least, again, in my opinion, in my takes of like the Eden Zero crew. I like pretty much the other Shining Stars more than Witch. But it's also obviously going to have an impact on the characters. Like, I don't think that this is a nothing death. I absolutely do not think that. When I was comparing it to Simon's death on Twitter, I thought it was funny that people were taking that as like I was comparing her to some nobody death. But it's more that people they didn't really understand Simon's death, because Simon's death was relevant for 600 something chapters, all the way till Drasil. His death had relevant holds within the series. So it's like, no, I'm actually kind of like, I'm actually relating it to like a pretty impactful death. It's just not like it's not like a this isn't Igneel. This isn't like Igneel. Not even remotely close. But with Witch, my biggest problem I think with Witch, besides like her not doing a whole lot, is Mishima brought her back and then killed her off in like a happier way, but I think less of a story impact way. I think it would have been way more interesting and it would have been way better for her to have died with like that scene when they arrived with Shura. I thought that was a really good moment for Mishima, and I think it could have built way more off, like there could have been way more built off that scene than this, because this is a really sad sacrifice, whereas I think more of like a aggressive kind of development and revelation would kind of like result from the whole stuff with Shura doing it. Because to me, it was a little weird that Mishima assured her safety and like her survival and then killed her off. And I'm not like just saying this because of Eden Zero. I've said the same thing about Makarov. I do not think that Mishima should even remotely set up some big hype Makarov death after Alvarez. I'm indifferent on a lot of like stuff like that on that scene specifically. I have a bias though because I want him to die inside the guild, but it's like I do not want him to ever kind of like hype that death up again, because it's like you can do that, but it's like when you put a character that in a position that bad where it's like you have no idea if they're gonna live or die, where it's not like they're hurt, they're actually like on the brink of death, and then you kind of bring him back just to kill him. It feels a little cheapened to me. Not again in a way that does nothing. I don't think that at all, and I think that's one of the things that I'm glad that I do videos on it because I can address in more of a detailed manner. But I think people were trying to I think people were assuming that I thought it was a nothing death, and I don't think that at all. I think it was a sad death. It's gonna have impact, but I think it wasn't as much as I think it could have, and it wasn't as much as I think a lot of people are making out to be. Because again, I like Witch, but Witch realistically hasn't done a whole lot in the series. She's mostly just a character that kind of talks in between points of planets, because she didn't do anything really in this arc other than get defeated by Shura. She didn't really do anything in Floresta. She really didn't do anything in Belialgor, because she failed against Draken Joe's crew, and then she off-screened Laguna in a fight that was the only Shining Star fight Mishima didn't really show. She didn't really do anything in Sunjewel, Digitalis. And again, I don't think that her character doesn't have weight in her death. I think that Mishima I think if he wanted to get the best impact out of what she had, I think that shocking death was better than like a going out death like this. Again, this is my opinion. For the people before you even comment in the video, I know there's probably some people that have commented already, and maybe they haven't gotten this far, but at least keep in mind, really, when you think about what she's done throughout the series. And Shiki and them, they're friends, but they've only really known her, aside from Hermit and Sister, they've only really known her for a couple months. So there is impact there, but I don't think Mishima built up enough for this. And I don't want to say anything. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna say this, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying anything bad about Eden Zero. And that's another thing I thought was really funny, is one guy was like saying how like I come out of any area to slander Eden Zero, almost as like I haven't been pushing the Eden Zero agenda since it came out. I haven't been making videos on Eden Zero. I haven't been hyping up Eden Zero and recommending it to people since it came out. I don't buy the volumes or do anything. I must hate Eden Zero. It's almost like I'm kind of just saying like I wasn't a huge fan of this part. And again, I had to legitimately kind of go at people who wanted to like downplay Simon's death, because Simon's death legitimately has tons of impact and weight to it, and it goes, especially when it goes into Jalal's story arc, which is one of the best character arcs Mishima's ever written. It's definitely one of his best ones. But and again, I'll say this, I'm not saying this in any way to slander Eden Zero. Out of Mishima's series, each of them, though they're all still written by him, but he obviously focuses on different things throughout each of them. Ravemaster was way more of a hero's journey. So him depicting like a heroic tale, a legendary tale, like giving off like stuff of like the legends of like obviously like people like Sheba, stuff about the Darkbring, all the bad guys, and kind of like building it up more around this kind of classical, again, hero's adventure kind of story. That's what he did. It was way more, and that's why one of the things about Ravemaster is, out of his stories, Ravemaster has a much more set, structured, designed plot. You know what like the overall plot of the story is early on. You understand essentially, get all the Ravestones, destroy all the Darkbring, and kind of save the world. You don't really know what Eden Zero's big plot is, or Fairy Tail's big plot is at the start. With Fairy Tail, Mishima focused way more on the characters. He focused way more on the characters themselves. Don't believe me? Think about 160 something chapters in. You already had Galuna Island, Phantom Lord, Tower of Heaven, the Fighting Festival, Erasion Sace. All of those had, to be perfectly honest, and again, this is just the thing that Fairy Tail is good at versus what Rave Master and Eden Zero good at. It gave way more focus on the characters. Mishima did way more, I think, in terms of like the characters' depth than what he did with like Rave Master and Eden Zero at this point. Whereas Eden Zero, and again, this is what Eden Zero is really good at. Mishima's done way more on like world building, the adventure, exploration, building the environments that they're in. It's way like he spent way more about the idea of it being a large scale adventure. But he has done obviously stuff with the characters. I even mentioned in this video that in out of the Oceans fight, the only one that was really to me that good, well, not good. The only one that was really to me that impactful was Jin's fight, because it also gave insight on his character and gave him some development. But factually, I do think Mishima has spent more time on the adventure aspect, again, which is what Eden Zero is more for, than the characters themselves. So Witch having all this build up, it's not, or sorry, not having enough build up, at least to me, and then killing her off in a way that I feel like he could have just done with Shura, kind of like made it a little bit less impact. And again, the way that I can kind of compare it to give another example of where, at least to me, this would be like if Mishima killed off Mira Jane before before we kind of got into stuff like the Fighting Festival when she fought Freed, or all that stuff beyond that. If Mishima waited a little bit longer and then maybe like built up a little, like if he did like this is the last thing I kind of want to put at. Saved against Shura. There's all stuff about like near death, and then like Mishima builds more on Witch and Witch's relationship to the crew, and then maybe in the next arc, Witch does actually die, and so it's like, oh man, we got that breather. It's like, okay, well now we'll start building stuff on, and then bam, that was literally just a short kind of false road to take. It was just kind of like a bait and switch over like a short period of time. At least that's that's again my opinion. If Witch was somebody's favorite character, I can understand why it would hit way more for them. But again, this is just something that I am putting out there. And again, actually, just as the last thing, I just want to one more mention. Legitimately, for anybody that thinks that me comparing Witch to Simon is like an insult, keep in mind, Simon's death happened before chapter 100. That's over 500 plus chapters of this piece in the story is relevant. I'm just saying. Legitimately, it's not an insult. It's actually, it's a pretty fair comparison. But, yeah, plus he was actually relevant in the arc. I'm just saying. Either way, I am actually sad. Poor Witch. I feel bad for her. I feel like Rebecca, though, is going to be taking her spot soon. I also have this weird theory now that, like, because, like, we know that time is not, like, the same in this series as other ones, like, the way that Mishima said himself. Like, the concept now of, like, if Witch ends up becoming Mother, just based off of this chapter, and obviously, like, the whole themes of Witch being the mother of the Eden Zero and stuff. I don't know. We'll have to just have to wait and see what Mishima has planned. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But in that, I appreciate everybody's subscribe. Thank you all for listening. Bye.